Hi, Tom Dixon here, your host of the Financial Experts Network, and really delighted to have a longtime friend and special guest, Kurt Czarnowski, with us here today to really address some important issues around Social Security, and in this case, the solvency of the Social Security fund, and will you be able to get your Social Security benefit when you in fact claim it? Now, by way of quick introduction, these are the highlights that we're posting from the Financial Experts Network. I encourage you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Click the bell if you'd like to get notice of upcoming videos that we do post. We will be posting on a very regular basis. And last but not least, as it relates to this video and all of our videos, feel free to share them with friends that you think would be interested in the information. And you'll see a bunch of resources and a little more about financial experts listed in the description. We will provide a very helpful Social Security frequently asked question guide that we put together over the years with the help of Kurt. So again, I hope you subscribe, click on the bell, take advantage of all the resources. So let me just share a little more background about Kurt, who's again joining us today. Kurt was actually with the Social Security Administration for 33 years, his entire career. Actually, his last position there, he served as Regional Communications Director for Social Security for the Northeast. I will tell you that he has been one of the most popular speakers that we've been fortunate enough to have in 12 years of hosting webinars like this. So, Kurt, without further ado, thank you so much for joining. It's a treat to have you.
And Tom, it's great to be back with you. Well, hope everybody who's viewing this is doing well and staying about as safe as can be and doing about as well as can be expected during these crazy times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So here's the breaking news. The Social Security report has come out, the trustees report, and of course, now they're projecting that the fund may be depleted a year earlier than what they had expected last year. So I think the burning question on many people's minds would be, geez, will Social Security be there when I'm ready to claim my benefit? So, Kurt, if you could start us off with some thoughts, that would be fantastic.
You know, Tom, I get this question all the time about the future of the program. Started getting this same question back in 1976 when I started working for the Social Security Administration. And I would go to Czarnowski family functions, and the Czarnowski uncles would sidle up to me, put their arm around me and go, Kurt, is there going to be anything there for me when it comes time for me to retire? And I always answer the question by referring to the words of Mark Twain, who once said, reports of my demise are greatly exaggerated. And I think the same is very true about the future of the Social Security program. You know, each year, the Social Security Board of Trustees, which consists of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Labor, Commissioner of Social Security, and there's supposed to be 2 public members, but positions have been vacant for a few years, issue a report on the financial health of the Social Security program. And in that report, they not only attempt to lay out the current status, but they attempt to lay out a 75-year projection for the future of the program. And to me, anyway, first and foremost, I think this is a really healthy exercise, because this annual report, at least one day a year, the public focuses on the future of the Social Security program. Now, that report comes out year over year over year over year. And as you pointed out, the 2021 report was issued August 31st. And basically, it says, as currently constituted, assuming no changes to the program whatsoever, no increase in taxes, no cuts in payments, Social Security stands ready, willing, and able to pay 100% of promised benefits each and every year between now and the end of the year 2034. And that point going forward, again, assuming nothing changes, trustees project the Social Security program would be able to pay 78% of promised benefits each and every year between now and the end of the year 2094. And to me, that's a very important point for people to focus on, particularly younger folks, you know, who say, is there going to be anything there for me down the road? Keep this in mind. Social Security's primary source of income are payroll tax dollars paid by employers, employees, and people who are self-employed. So absent a complete and total collapse of the United States economy so that nobody anywhere is working, Social Security is always going to have a revenue stream of some sort going forward. And the question is, absent changes on the part of Congress to the program, are those revenue streams thought to be sufficient to cover 100% of the benefits that have been promised? And as I said, current trustees assume that current status enables 100% of promised benefits to be paid through the year 2034. But beginning that point going forward, the tax revenue coming in is anticipated to be enough to cover 78% of the promised benefits. So the issue confronting the Congress and the American public about the long-range solvency of Social Security is not how do you close a 100% funding gap by tomorrow. It's no, how over the course of the next 13 years or so does Congress come up with some changes to the program to close this 22% funding gap to enable 100% of promised benefits to be paid going forward. And to me, Social Security is not a program that faces an immediate crisis. It's a program, though, that faces some challenges, and the challenges have been reported each and every year with the trustees. The challenge is largely demographically driven. You know, it's the aging of the baby boom population like myself. The good news that people are living longer in retirement, which, while it's individually a bit of good news, it also represents a strain on the Social Security program because now people are going to be collecting for a longer period of time. And the third demographic issue that comes in is the fact that the baby boom generation was followed by the baby bust generation. Social Security, at its base, it's a pay-as-you-go system. It is today's workers and their employers and the people who are self-employed who are paying those Social Security payroll taxes that are used to pay the benefits to the folks who are collecting these days. And if the workforce shrinks, then that places a strain on the Social Security program. Right now, we're at the situation where there's about 3 people working, contributing to the program to support each one person who's collecting. Trustees project by that 2034, 2035, that will have dropped down to about 2 to 1. And that's where some of the challenge facing the future of the Social Security program is. But, as I said, I think reports of the program's demise are greatly exaggerated. It faces some challenges, but it's not a program in crisis. And at its worst, Congress does nothing. And to quote Wally Shawn in The Princess Bride, it's inconceivable that they'll do nothing. I think Congress is going to act sooner rather than later. And if politics teaches us anything these days, Congress lurches from crisis to crisis, and it may well be an immediate funding crisis that will spur Congress into action. It would be better for everyone if Congress were to take steps today, deal with the issue, because that would enable particularly younger folks to have a better handle and plan for their retirement down the road as they should be doing. But I don't hold out too much hope. It seems to me that it would, in part of Congress, it would require a level of comity, and that's C-O-M-I-T-Y, which is sorely lacking, as opposed to the comedy, C-O-M-E-D-Y, which appears to be very prevalent these days. But again, reports of its demise are greatly exaggerated. It's a program that faces some challenges, but it's not a program in crisis.
Follow up on your point about the 78% of the benefits being paid starting in, let's say, 2034, right? So if today, putting aside the impact of COLA for the moment, just to make this simple, if you were collecting, let's say, $1,000 a month in the year 2034, and then if current circumstances stay in place, you're now going to get 78% of that in 2035. That would be that would mean essentially that your benefit would go from $1,000 a month from 2034 to $780 in 2035. Is that correct, Kurt?
That's basically the way. It's a good way to think about it. It'll never be at the point, again, absent complete collapse of the United States economy, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome type scenario. There's always going to be a revenue stream. And you're never talking about the system having no money whatsoever.
Okay, great. And so the reason I raise this is my concern for people would be if you were to rush to claim early at age 62, which is not necessarily in your best interest, then because of a concern that, geez, will it be there when I'm older and when it turns 2034, 2035, what that does is set you up for the possibility that you will have a reduced benefit for the rest of your life, one. And if you're the higher wage earner, and again, you collect early, and let's say you predecease your spouse, then your spouse, the survivor benefit that they will receive will be possibly dramatically reduced as well. Is that all correct?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I also like to quote the great philosopher Yogi Berra, who says, "I'm very reluctant to make predictions, especially about the future." So I'm a little reluctant to make predictions. But if the past teaches us anything, it's when Congress deals with this type of issue, which they've done on several occasions in the past, the changes they have made have been done prospectively. There have generally been and have grandfathered in people who are currently collecting, who are close to collecting, allowed to operate under the current rules, because Congress has recognized it might be close to cruel and unusual punishment to pull the rug out from people so close to retirement. So the point you raise is an absolutely valid one. And when asked that, which I do periodically, I agree with you that there are many reasons behind making a decision about when to start collecting Social Security payments. And we can touch on some of those and the impact of that early decision. But I always say other factors need to be your health, longevity. Do you need the money? All those come into play. And you should not be basing a decision about whether to collect or not on whether or not you think the program's going to run out of money, because I just don't think that's ever going to happen.
Right. That's great. And again, for folks listening, we will do another little session with Kurt on the whole issue of should you claim at age 62, should you wait? That's a very important and related issue, but relative to the larger question of will Social Security be there when I go to claim, assuming you're not yet 62, most importantly, hopefully what's coming through here with Kurt is, again, even absent any action from Congress, there still will be monies or benefit dollars available through the year 2094. So again, please take note of that. Now, Kurt,
Tom, there's please. Always going to be money. It's through the year 2094. It's projected to be 78% covered. Right. Beginning 2095, it drops down a little bit, but there's still not a situation where there's no money coming in.
Even beyond that. Yeah, that's great point. Thank you for that. Okay. So there have been a lot of recommendations and policy proposals as to what could fix the system, right? What are the possible solutions? And if you would, in your opinion, just share a few ideas for what you think could remedy the situation, that would be great.
Sure. And basically gets back to the fundamental nature of the Social Security program, which is it's money coming in, it's money going out. And like to say, the issue confronting Social Security these days, or it's really the Congress and the American public, no different than somebody's situation at home. If at the end of the month, you don't have enough money to pay all of your bills, you need to do one of two things. You either need to bring more money in or pay a little bit less out. And I think that same is true for Social Security in terms of closing this 22% funding gap between now and the end of the year 2034. Well, you could certainly close the gap simply by increasing revenue by 22%. Or you could close the gap simply by cutting benefits by 22%. But if you think about it, if you close it simply on the income side, who are you impacting? Well, employers, younger folks like yourself, Tom. You close it solely by cutting benefits, who are you impacting? Older people like me. And so I think at the end of the day, when Congress does get around to dealing with the issue, you're going to see a mixture, a blend, if you will, of some reasonable increases on the income side, paired with some reasonable slowdowns on the outflow side, so that the pain, if you will, is shared equally, and no one person's ox gets gored any more than the other. So on the income side, someone who is working in the Social Security program these days pays a 6.2% Social Security payroll tax on each year. There's a maximum level of earnings that are subject to that Social Security payroll tax. In the year 2021, for example, you pay that tax on the first $142,800 that you make. Any money you make above that, you'll continue to pay a 1.45% Medicare hospital tax, but you don't pay Social Security's 6.2% payroll tax on those earnings. Now, those earnings, the tax matched by your employer, and those of us who are self-employed have the privilege of paying the combined employer-employee rate. But it's important to note that that 6.2% payroll tax rate has been constant since the year 1990. The payroll tax rate of 6.2% has been the same for 30 plus years. So one solution as a way to increase revenue for the program is to increase that 6.2% Social Security payroll tax. Now, you don't have to raise it to 10%, 20%. The trustees report says that if the solution to this 75-year shortfall were simply to be addressed by payroll tax adjustment only, they say that if you raise the Social Security payroll tax by 3.56%, 3.54%, and that's half by the employer, half by the employee. You did that today, that would close the gap over the next 75 years. So it doesn't need to be a 10, 20, 30% increase. And I'm not proposing that be done, but for me anyway, one way to generate some additional revenue for the system is to increase that payroll tax from its 30-year 6.2% level to maybe 6.4% or some modest increase both on employer and employee. Secondly, as I pointed out, that there is an annual tax ceiling upon which that Social Security payroll tax is imposed. As I said again, this year, $142,800 subject to Social Security tax. Anything above that, not subject to Social Security payroll tax. Now, it's important to note that in calculating somebody's benefit, Social Security does average someone's prior year earnings, but the only earnings that are averaged are those up to that Social Security payroll tax maximum. But proposal out there is to increase that payroll tax maximum a little bit. Now, it does go up each year with the growth in the average wage index in the country. So it does go up a little bit year over year. I think it was 139.2 or something last year, doesn't matter. But you could increase that above the regular increase that you'd see because of the increase in wages. Now, just to point this out though, that increasing the taxable maximum is in many ways a double-edged sword though, because on the short run, it certainly would generate more income for the Social Security program. But again, if you're raising the cap, then you're having higher benefit as a result of those additional wages that have been subject to tax. So that's something out there just to keep in mind. You can increase the tax rate, you can increase the tax base, but increasing the tax base, it does have that offset, if you will, that it does result in perhaps higher benefits down the road that mitigate some of the benefit that comes from simply raising the wage base. On the outflow side, I think I referenced, your benefit is calculated by averaging your 35 highest years of work under the system. Well, a change that could be considered as a way to reduce benefit payments or slow down benefit payments is to change the number of years that are averaged from 35 maybe to 37 or maybe 38, so that you're averaging over a longer period of time that will reduce benefit payments a little bit. Now, it's also important to note, and we'll talk about this maybe in another segment, Social Security's key component in understanding when to collect benefits is understanding what is called your full retirement age. Now, the Social Security full retirement age initially set as the month someone turned age 65. Set that way back in 1935, stayed that way till 1983, when Congress, recognizing that life expectancy was increasing, increased Social Security full retirement age. Now, for a big chunk of the baby boomers like myself, our full retirement age was when we turned 66. But anyone born 1960 or later, it's when the month they turned 67. So another way to maybe slow down benefit payments is to further increase that Social Security full retirement age. So there's a bunch of proposals out there for people to consider. I always like to refer them to the Social Security Administration website, socialsecurity.gov, and the Office of the Actuary page on the Social Security website. Actuaries have tried to play the role of honest broker in that as proposals for changes to the program have come up, they try to score them, if you will, and tell people what the perceived impact of that type of change would be on the future of the program. And on the website, there's a great deal of information. All of those different changes, including the 4 I mentioned, are all out there having been scored by the actuaries, which is good because they're using the same set of standards in terms of judging the future impact of those changes. So people interested in getting more information about that, Social Security's website, www.socialsecurity.gov/ and then in all capital letters, OACT. By the way, everybody knows what an actuary is, right? Actuary is somebody who doesn't have enough personality to be an accountant. Ba-dum-bum.
There you go. I've heard that before, by the way. Okay. So ssa.gov/OACT.
Correct. All capital letters.
Okay. Great. We will post that again in the description field as well. So last on this issue, Kurt, just to again, in terms of will Social Security be there, if you could just briefly explain the fact that the assets that really fund Social Security benefits and payments are held in a separate fund, a trust fund, if you will. You could explain how that works and how those monies are separate and held apart from those that are held in the general operating reserves, if you will, that pay for the rest of government. If you could just explain that, please.
Sure. So, quick bit of history. Early days of the program, Social Security operated on a purely pay-as-you-go basis, meaning those actuaries would put their eye shades on, roll up their sleeves, take out their pencils, figure out how much the program would need to pay out in benefits. So they'd set the tax rate so that they take in just enough money to cover the anticipated benefit payments, by the way, plus the administrative expenses for the agency, and then maybe a little bit of a cushion. But it was as close to pure pay-as-you-go as it could be. But by 1983, Congress, looking forward, saw the retirement wave of the baby boom generation looming on the horizon. And so as a significant part of a comprehensive package of amendments that were passed at that time, nature of the program was shifted from this essentially pure pay-as-you-go to a partially advance funded system, meaning since 1983, the Social Security program each year has been taking in more money deliberately than it's needed to pay benefits and cover administrative expenses for the agency. The idea being to build up this surplus, also known as the Social Security Trust Fund, which could be called upon down the road as the baby boomers started to retire and would be used to pay the benefits to those folks. Now, by law, any additional money that Social Security takes in each year can only be invested in special obligation U.S. Treasuries. All right, Social Security has the most undiverse portfolio of anybody out there. Special government treasuries only. Now, again, think about it though, viewed as the safest and securest investment vehicle possible. Think back to the historical roots of the program. If in 1935, FDR had stood up and said, hey, everybody, any Social Security money, I'm going to take it down to Wall Street and invest it there, he probably wouldn't have had a second term, much less a third or a fourth. So it was set up deliberately, investments in government bonds, safe, secure. And since 1983, these additional funds have been coming in, and through the passage of time, Social Security's trust funds, and we'll talk about there are two different trust funds within the Social Security family, but now have combined assets to the tune of nearly $3 trillion. And the whole idea of this balance was to help fund benefit payments for baby boomers. And so in this current trustees report, they project that beginning in the year 2021, the Social Security program will now need to start redeeming some of those bonds. Now, up until now, payroll tax revenue, plus the interest that has been earned on those bonds, plus some revenue that comes in from the federal taxation of benefits, has been enough to cover the administrative expenses and benefit payments. But beginning in the year 2021 now, that's not going to be enough. Social Security will start to redeem some of those bonds and use some of that capital, if you will, to pay benefit payments going forward. And the trustees project that this will be sufficient, as I said, to allow 100% of benefits to be paid between payroll tax dollars, whatever it continues to be earned in interest, plus the cashing in of the bonds through the end of the year 2034. At that point, all of the bonds will have been cashed. So Social Security's only revenue stream will be those payroll taxes, plus maybe a little bit from the taxation of benefits. But, you know, talk about this trust fund, it's serving the need for which it was created. It was recognized it was going to be a greater need with the baby boom generation. So they set aside money to help meet the payments, and that's what the money's been used for. Incidentally, within the Social Security trust funds, there are actually, as I mentioned, two separate funds. One is the OASI, or the Old Age and Survivor Insurance Fund, and the other is the Disability Insurance Fund. And workers who pay that 6.2% total FICA tax, 5.3% actually goes into the Retirement and Survivor Program. 0.9% these days goes to fund the disability program. And so generally, though, when the trustees report, they issue on both the health of the individual trust funds, because they are by law separate legal entities, but typically they'll talk about the combined assets, because in the past, early 80s, for example, when the Retirement Survivor Program was facing some real difficulties, because I don't know, Tom, if you were around then, I was, but that was a time of stagflation. You had high unemployment, high inflation, putting a real financial strain on the Social Security program. There was one year with a 9.9% cost of living increase, 14%, 8%. And so there was a real danger, which, you know, of the Social Security Retirement Survivor Program running out of money. So at that point, Congress passed a law that allowed the Disability Insurance Fund to lend money to the Retirement and Survivor Fund. That money was paid back in a couple of years with interest, but you've had this inter-fund borrowing. But you've also had periods of time where that payroll tax, the relative rate, has been adjusted. And in 2015, statute was passed because the disability program was facing some difficulties that adjusted the tax rate so that some more money went towards the disability fund for 3 years in 16, 17, and 18, and lowered the rate that went into the Retirement Survivors Fund. But it's been reverted now back to its 5.3% for the Old Age and Survivor Fund, 0.9% for disability. So there is flexibility between the two different funds, but they are legal entities, each one funded through those payroll taxes. But Congress historically has, in its management of the program, had some flexibility in terms of moving money between the two.
All right, great. So again, folks, if you're concerned about will Social Security be there or be gone, or what will be the state of it, again, if you haven't yet claimed your Social Security benefit, hopefully you consider the facts. Again, the history here is the program's been around since 1935, right, Kurt? And there certainly have been ups and downs along the way.
You know, and absolutely, and I think that has been a hallmark of the program, the fact that it has changed over time as society has changed. And to me, it's unrealistic to think that going forward there won't be other changes to the program. They should be part and parcel of the fact it's a dynamic program meeting the needs of the American public. And so that we should be anticipating and expecting these changes to be made, because they've always been made in the past and allowed the program to remain as vital as it is today.
Great. Okay. All right, Kurt. Well, thanks so much for all the insights on this. And again, for everybody listening, you're welcome to visit the website, financialexpertsnetwork.com. We'll have that on screen. For those of you listening in as a Financial Experts Network subscriber, special thank you. And if you're happen to be a client of one of our financial advisor subscribers, then great. And you're viewing this, great to see that. And so with that, again, we're going to wrap it up. I'll encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and if you have any comments or questions, you can post them in the appropriate inbox there, if you will, and we'll try our best to get that. So with that, Kurt, thank you so much for this, and look forward to doing a few more videos with you.
Thanks, Tom. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.